I'll just say, when I went to Israel immediately after their attack by Hamas, 8 days later, whatever it was, and I told them we were going to help. And I said, but Bibi, I said, you can't be carpet bombing these communities. And he said to me, well, you did it.
So I don't know if Joe Biden intended to reveal what he revealed in that interview, if he was telling an anecdote and sort of just fell into it, but he appeared to indicate pretty clearly there that in a private conversation with Benjamin Netanyahu in the wake of the attacks on October 7th, Netanyahu was advocating for carpet bombing Gaza, or at least pointing out, some of the, I guess, lack of moral high ground that our country has in that area. And so, look, there's been a lot of criticism, I think rightly so, of the military strategy. Biden is indicating there that he was advocating in private the way that he has in public for them to dial back the violence and all that. And there has not been literal carpet bombing, certainly not on the scale that Netanyahu was referred to the US committing in World War II. But I would say that, like, if you just spread it out over a long period of time, is it fundamentally different? Like, doing it all at once has the term carpet bombing. If you do it over the course of months and destroy as many buildings and kill as many people, I don't know, the difference seems a little bit more academic than substantive at that point for me. But that said, we have a little bit more of Joe Biden and a little bit of what he was doing in regards to Benjamin Netanyahu.
I said, but Bibi, I said, you can't be carpet bombing these communities. And he said to me, well, you did it. You carpet bombed, not his exact words, but you carpet bombed Berlin. You dropped a nuclear weapon. You killed thousands of innocent people because you had to in order to win a war. I said, but that's why we came up with the UN. New deals by which what we would do relative to civilians and military.
So he was comparing 21st century war tactics, battle tactics, with World War II.
Well, what he was really doing is he was going after me for saying you can't indiscriminately bomb civilian areas. Even if the bad guys are there. Even if the bad guys are there, you can't take out 2, 10, 12, 1,500 people, innocent people, in order to get the one bad guy.
And by the way, I don't want to blow Benjamin Netanyahu's mind or anything, but a lot of people no longer believe that much of that was necessary to draw those wars to a close. He should do some reading. It's interesting stuff. But anyway, the issue is that in the end, a lot of people were killed. And so the Palestinian health authorities, they say that more than 46,600 people have been killed, over half of the identified victims being women, children, or older people, not the sort of combatants that they might be labeled. A recent study actually put that toll closer to 70,000. And so, I don't know, I feel like it should be bigger news that Joe Biden indicated that in this conversation relatively early on, following October 7th, Netanyahu was saying, no, we're gonna do whatever we think we need to do. And we're gonna do it from the same sort of approach to warfare that the US used during World War II decades and decades and decades ago. And Biden would say he was trying to advocate against them doing that, and yet the death toll became what it was. And that's one thing, but then after having had that conversation and seeing the results, seeing the strategy and the death toll from it, the sheer devastation from it, Biden continued giving weapons and aid and support up until literally this last week. It was one of the last things he okayed as president. And so, I don't know what he took away from that conversation. I don't know, you would think he's been paying a lot of attention to the situation in Gaza ever since then, and yet the actions he's taken since then seem utterly inconsistent with the sort of moral high ground that he wanted us to have, that he would imply that he was standing in when he had that conversation. So the entire thing is frustrating. We're gonna turn to Antony Blinken, some of the last things he said in regards to this conflict, as we close out the days of Joe Biden's presidency. But Yaz, I wanna turn to you. What do you make about this? Are you surprised at all about that conversation?
I just don't know what his intention was in revealing that conversation. What does he want to thank you? Like, thank you so much, President Biden, for your immense efforts in curbing the genocidal tendencies of your good friend Benjamin Netanyahu. He's really just doing the absolute least. He stated something incredibly obvious to a genocidal maniac. He conceded immediately to opposition or to his objections, and then he just continued to, as you said, fund and arm Israel. And why did an argument like that even work on Biden? He's not the one who bombed anyone during World War II. And I think you mentioned this as well. Those bombs have been controversial from the beginning, from before they were dropped. They were incredibly controversial. They still are incredibly controversial. And the idea that one country indiscriminately bombing civilians in a nation justifies another country indiscriminately bombing civilians in a nation is absurd. It's also very jarring the way that he's talking about thousands of people dying. These world leaders, they really just sit in their offices and they make decisions that impact thousands and thousands of lives around the world, not just in these very specific areas. People have family members who have died over there. People have entire families who have died over there. It's really upsetting the way he's talking about it. And I really don't know why he's talking about it now as if he did something good, because he really didn't. Even if he felt some type of way about it, he didn't do anything to stop what was going on.
David?
Well, I mean, look, it seems like Joe Biden was trying to communicate somehow that at the beginning of Israel's war against Hamas, a week after the October 7th massacre, that he was trying to urge Israel to be more precise, use more precise munitions. Don't just take out entire buildings where there may be dozens of terrorists, because then yes, even though Hamas hides underneath schools and mosques and civilian areas, that's not an excuse to then sort of wipe out that building. And I think that's the point that Biden was making, but I'm not sure what he could have said that would have changed anything, because the fact of the matter is, if you look at, for example, the peace deal that was just signed, the ceasefire, the representative from Qatar, from Hamas in Qatar, said in signing this that there'll be another October 7th, that they will support another October 7th, that their aim is to wipe Israel off the map. That's who Israel's enemy is. So I think Israel was in a tough spot when 1,200 of their people got massacred. A war is a terrible thing. It was a terrible thing in World War II. There was no justifiable military target in the United States dropping bombs in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. I don't think Israel engaged in indiscriminate bombing. Israel at least says that it was trying to target Hamas, and unfortunately, thousands of innocent people who were living there got killed. But war is a terrible thing. And I think, Joe Biden trying to sort of wash his hands of it doesn't really make any sense to me.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. And you brought up the question, like, what could he have said? Maybe nothing. Maybe there's literally nothing that he could have said. There's theoretically things he could have done. Like, I'm glad that in the immediate, the beginning days of that, he was advocating for restraint. But if restraint isn't pursued, then maybe you can't talk to him. Maybe you can't force him to follow the military strategy that you'd prefer, but then you don't have to supply the bombs that are gonna be used in an indiscriminate fashion. Like, if you don't like the way the bombs are being used, stop giving them bombs to use, would be my advice. And to Netanyahu, again, I don't think I'll be any more persuasive towards him than Joe Biden was capable of. But when he talks about, like, it's an existential threat, we do whatever we want. We carpet bomb, we glass all of Gaza, whatever, it doesn't matter, we have to win the war. Yeah, that's what the other side says too. Like, I hear sometimes, like Pete Hegseth was talking about, like, why do we comply with these international treaties and all that? Some of our enemies don't. We don't just comply with this stuff out of kindness towards our enemies. We do it out of an aspirational hope, which I think is often returned, that our troops will be treated with the same respect, that those we fight will comply with these rules. And I do think that, with some exceptions, that has generally been the rule of the last few decades. When you act in this fashion towards them, you teach them that's the way we do this. We're willing to kill your civilians to take out your military because it's existential. Well, then why would they not be willing to continue doing that to you as well? And then what moral high ground do you have to say it's unacceptable to target civilians when we already have the reporting from a couple weeks ago that you literally laid out, oh no, you can't just kill 5 civilians to take out 1 expected Hamas member, let's make it 100. You've given the dark calculus that they now can also follow. And I know what he might say, they're gonna do it anyway, they're a terrorist group. Sure, but now they're on the same moral playing field as you. And so again, like.
But John, to Netanyahu's point, though, I don't think the United States or even Joe Biden has a leg to stand on. I mean, Joe Biden supported the war in Iraq. If you look at some of the urban warfare battles of Fallujah, there were plenty of Iraqi civilians. When US troops went into Baghdad, there were estimated 20,000 civilians that were killed in this first sort of run into Baghdad in the Second Gulf War. Was that fair? Was that something the United States should have engaged in? And I think that's the point when you're talking about urban warfare. A war, a lot of people, a lot of innocent people get killed, and the United States is just as guilty of that as anybody. And I think that was Netanyahu's point. Fine, you don't like the fact that we're gonna kill a lot of innocent people to try to destroy Hamas. Well, maybe a lot of Iraqis didn't like the fact that hundreds of thousands of innocent Iraqis died in the US effort to try to get at the Iraqi troops. War is a terrible thing.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right to bring up the massive civilian death toll in Iraq. I've seen estimates of 400,000 or more, which is obviously utterly unacceptable. I wasn't on the air to respond to that sort of stuff at that point, but TYT obviously from before the war even began, spoke out against it. I will say also though, we haven't, God hope, that we don't have a 20-year continuation of this conflict in Gaza, but we should also point out that estimates have shown that the pace of civilian casualties has no equal in any of these conflicts. Now, obviously, if you stretch it over that many years, maybe the US invasion of Iraq would end up being worse, but yeah, it's wrong in both of those cases.
The war is ending after a year. I mean, the US war in Iraq went on for what, 12 years? So yeah, I mean, you could say, 70,000 civilians killed in a year. That's terrible, it's awful, but again, Israel has ended the war. I mean, they've got a peace deal, and would the war have gone on a lot longer if Israel had tried to be more precise? Probably, and maybe they could have eventually defeated Hamas by just using bullets and going on the ground and having ground invasion, but I think a lot of civilians, I think Gaza would be even worse now. Anyway.
I don't know, and obviously to even do this speculation would require more time than we have for the topic. I will say, I hope that you're right. I hope that this deal is the end of it. That I think very much remains to be seen. The history of the region implies that it might not be as clean as that, but I hope for everyone's sake, especially the civilians on both sides, that ends up being the case.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.